In this chapter, we will present to you the different types of library and instrument options that are available, and to do so we have chosen 3 current products with which to show you this. And one of these that we have been using in previous chapters is the Vienna Symphonic Library, or VSL, and in our case the VSL Special Edition. We are using the VSL to demonstrate the single instrument library type. Fundamentally, a single instrument library is one which places an individual instrument on a single track. In practice, this means I have to load the VSL plugin for each track that I want to have an instrument on. Once the plugin is loaded on the right, you choose the instrument you want the track to play. One advantage of this option is that you have a lot of flexibility in how each instrument is played. As we have seen earlier, you have many articulation options and a variety of control options per instrument. Another advantage of having an individual instrument per track is that if I wish to see or print out a score of my arrangement, each track has the notes for a specific instrument, which makes printing or viewing the score easier later on. One disadvantage of this approach is that you have to build your orchestra yourself, by which we mean you have to load all the instruments required separately, and in theory create a template which contains everything you may need. This is very flexible but can be time-consuming. It might also have the downside that if you are simply trying to compose music, you may not know exactly which instruments you will need. So it may be a better option to use a different method, i.e. loading a library that is more complete from the off, in which case our next library type may be more suitable. And this is the multi-library option. To represent this, we have chosen the Cine Samples Cine Symphony Lite library. And if we look here on the left in the instrument section, we see that we only have 6 presets. We have loaded the Strings Ensemble Arco Lite patch. The advantage of this patch is that the complete string section of an orchestra, i.e. the violins, the violas, the cellos, and the contrabass, are placed on a single keyboard. Of course, you can adjust a variety of parameters from within the plugin, and as standard, the modulation wheel is controlling expression. And if we play from left to right, we go from the contrabass, through the cellos, up to the violas, and onto the violins. One thing that we notice here is that the instruments are already panned, and there is a reverb included within the patch. You also have the possibility to adjust the different instrument groups' levels, and to adjust a variety of effects and articulation options to suit your taste. With this patch, for example, you can simply start playing with an excellent sound and work on ideas without having to set anything up. You can switch between the short and longer samples, and using the advanced controls, we can adjust the key ranges of the specific instrument groups. So, for example, I could specify that the cello plays from C0 up to G3 if I wished. A disadvantage of this is that if I wish to print out individual instruments, I will have to edit the MIDI data in my DAW. But this is a great option for simply adding strings to, say, a pop track, or for creating ideas quickly. So we would certainly recommend a product such as this for ease of use and instant satisfaction. On top of that, the library is still a complete library with pizzicato strings, brass, and woodwind ensembles, as well as timpani and percussion. As this is the light version, we are limited to these presets, but the full version of Cine Symphony is more comparable to the VSL plugin that we have been using in previous chapters. And now we come to our third type of library instrument, and this is the most recent method of reproducing instruments, and it is the phrased instrument option. To demonstrate this, I will open the track, and we can see that we have chosen the Sonokinetic Capriccio plugin. If we find the plugin in the library here on the left, we can see that there are the typical sections available to us. These are labelled strings, woodwinds, brass, etc. And further down the list, we have the light version. But if we look at the Capriccio plugin, we can see that it looks somewhat different to the previous libraries. The difference with this type of library is that you do not play it like a normal instrument, as we have previously shown in the Cine Samples library, for example. In fact, the library is full of individually recorded phrases played on specific instruments. If we look here at the bottom, we have the basses. Then, in the middle, we have the violas and cellos, and at the top we have the violins. And each of the sections contains variations of phrases, and these are accessible from within the phrase picker page. If we look below at the keyboard, it is not laid out like a typical instrument, but functions more as a remote controller for the individual phrases. In the lower blue section, I can choose my chords by playing the chord. With certain other keys, I can turn options on and off, and with the green keys, I can specify the bass notes of the phrases. So if I hold a chord in the blue section, we can hear it. And by playing the green keys, I can change the root of the pattern that is playing. This type of library is not very common for the minute, and Sonokinetics could be certainly considered as the market leader in this direction for now. Clearly an advantage of this library is that someone without the skills to perform complex patterns can create arrangements quite quickly that sound incredibly realistic, and a professional composer can use this to create realistic sketches, probably quicker than using a multi-library. But the downside to this approach could be that we are limited to the phrases that are included. You can test the individual phrases by playing them. But that is what you have, no more, no less. So if you cannot find a phrase that suits your composition or arrangement, there is not a lot you can do. Having said that, it is worth taking this approach seriously, and it is fun to use. So in summing up, it is clear that the best approach would probably be to have all three options available to you. They each bring their own advantages and disadvantages, but a combination of all three is certainly worth considering. Later on in this tutorial, we will see how these three approaches can be combined.